Dr. No was the first of Fleming's novels to be adapted by Albert R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman. But is the novel any good? Bond is not exactly in M's good books due to his cock-up in From Russia of Love. This sets up the story nicely as Bond is set on an easy mission by M. This tension is effectively the backbone of the whole plot. So far in this series we've actually seen Bond and M have a rather amicable and good working relationship. There's been a few arguments here and there, but on the whole they've got on. So to start the book off with, firstly, Bond is not in a good place. He's pretty miserable, he's not very happy, he's kind of kicking himself for the way he reacted in the last book. So it sets up his character in a very interesting way for Dr. No. His sort of injury or his poisoning at the end of From Russia of Love is a brief plot point here, but it basically doesn't really bear much relevance of the fact that Bond has been off work for some time, and this is his first mission in a long time, and it's a quote-unquote easy mission that M is putting Bond on here. And Bond is really annoyed with M for giving him a really, really easy mission. And M's really annoyed with Bond, but it's kind of... it doesn't resort to, like, outright shouting matches or anything like that. It's kind of beneath the surface, and it's really very nicely done, the scene where Bond is getting briefed, and it's pretty similar to what we get in the film, but obviously in the film, that's the first adventure we have of Bond, but there's a subtleness, like, of Bond getting transferred in the film, and that's given more detail here. So it's a very nice backbone to the film. In the film, Honey Rider's involvement in the story is actually fairly minimal. But in the book, Honey Rider, or Honey Child Rider, is far more present throughout the story. One chapter of the book involves Honey telling Bond her own backstory, which, interestingly, Bond prompts Honey rather enthusiastically to hear about her past. This is a sizable chunk of a chapter, and while the backstory is well written, it does feel like a massive load of exposition just thrown in one go. Honey Rider is, however, a decent enough Bond girl, and is present throughout the story. Though, based on past Bond girls, I doubt she'll appear again. Dr. No is a fairly good villain. His late introduction is questionable, much like in the film. The reason why we wait so long before he appears is simply down to Dr. No being reclusive, but when we finally get to Dr. No, he's terrific, cruel and sadistic. With his dialogue, I can hear Joseph Wiseman, who played Dr. No in the film. But there's more depth, but the very essence of the character is the same in both iterations. At times, however, Dr. No does come across as a tad two-dimensional. And like Honey Rider, his backstory is delivered in long passages of dialogue, though his backstory is interesting and adds a lot to the book. On the whole, Dr. No is a cracking villain. Fleming wrote his dialogue very well. There are elements of the story that surprised me. Bond and Quarrel arrive on Crab Key a lot sooner than I expected, perhaps because Professor Dent does not exist in the book, which does make sense. Quarrel is poorly written, and unfortunately his dialogue is set rigidly in the time in which Dr. No is written. His friendship with Bond is a nice part of the book. They genuinely seem to get on. Miss Tarot, an agent of Dr. No's, totally vanishes from the story. I genuinely forgot Miss Tarot was even in the book until Bond mentioned her. In the film, a whole section is dedicated to Bond sleeping with her, so that she gets arrested. It's done much more effectively in the adaptation. Here, Fleming just drops the character. Dr. No is a rather breezy book. It was obviously never going to be as good as From Russia of Love, so I wouldn't say I'm disappointed. Dr. No made for an entertaining, if somewhat underwhelming read. So Dr. No was a really enjoyable read. It wasn't the most innovative book in the series. I think it was rather entertaining, enjoyable. Some things didn't get resolved, but that doesn't really matter. I think it's just a nice book to read. It's not going to set the world on fire. It hasn't set the world on fire. It's been out for decades. So it's not the most interesting book on earth. It's not the most groundbreaking, but it is just a nice, entertaining job. It does the job of entertaining you and gripping you for however long you're reading it for, and that's it. I doubt I'll really remember much about this book afterwards. It does reference Live and Let Die quite a bit, so you can't just read this and having never read a Bond book before. But on the whole, it is an enjoyable Bond novel. The next book I shall be looking at will be Goldfinger. I shall see you then.